nations as when he fought in the day of battle. So it seems like this is going to be a short amount of time and the Lord will just turn the tide. From one point of view, the nations will be gathered against Jerusalem. To men, this may not appear to be a refining process, but from another point of view, we know from what immediately follows in verse 3 that the Lord is gathering the nations against Jerusalem for the purpose of fighting against them. And we know that this is not a new thing that the Lord will do. Babylon was used of God in the same manner. The Babylonians were used of God to punish Israel, but then the Lord punished the Babylonians also. The great whore, Babylon the Great, is being used to draw off those who are unfaithful to God, but God will render unto her double. Knowing these things, that God is the ruler among the nations, that he does all these things, we should be taught not to murmur when difficult things happen to us, because none of these things are happenstance. We also may rest assured that the enemies of God's people are also the enemies of God. Amen. It will appear to the nations that their first attempts at Jerusalem back in chapter 12 failed due to poor planning or bad politics or faulty military tactics or some other human flaw. They will think themselves to be successful this time when they take the city and even take captives and spoil the houses. But the Lord is merely setting them up. They thought they were coming to take Jerusalem, but God gathered them so that he could take them. He will fight against those nations as when he fought in the day of battle. The Lord has fought against Israel's enemies many times, so it's not clear whether this is speaking of one particular battle. However, some of the commentators have well made a connection with this day of battle perhaps being the crossing of the Red Sea when all the Egyptians drowned in the sea. I want to quote from Osorius here. He says, "All wars are so disposed by the power of God that every victory is to be referred to his counsel and will. But this is not seen so clearly when people, elate and confident, try to transfer themselves all or the greater part of the glory of war. Then may the war be eminently said to be the Lord's, when no one drew the sword. As it is written, the Lord shall fight for you, and ye shall hold your peace." Of all God's wars in which human insolence could claim no part of the glory, none was more wondrous than that in which Pharaoh and his army were sunk in the deep. "The Lord," said Moses, "is a man of war. The Lord is his name." That's from Exodus 15. Although many have leaped to conclusions in this text, note that he does not say that he is going to destroy those nations. He says that he will fight against them. Now, perhaps their armies are destroyed, as the Egyptian army was destroyed, but not the whole nation. We know that the nations are not yet completely destroyed because verses 12 through 19 of this chapter continue to speak about the nations. And let us not forget that some of the inhabitants of Jerusalem have been taken captive away to some of these nations. So that hardly seems to be an adequate ending to the Lord's work. And the reason I say this is because some have also connected Revelation chapter 20 with this text in Zechariah. "And when 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison, and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. And they went up on the breadth of the earth, and compassed the camp of the saints about, and the beloved city. And fire came down from God out of heaven, and devoured them. And the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented day and night forever and ever." Now, if you're familiar with that text in Revelation, you know that the very next verse follows is the judgment. The day of judgment commences. So the circumstances here in the Revelation 20 text that I just read and in Zechariah 14 are similar. They are similar circumstances, but I don't believe it's speaking of the same thing because there are some major differences. There are similarities in Zechariah 14 and Revelation 20 because the nations are involved, not just one nation. So that's similar in both texts. In both texts, the nations come against Jerusalem, the beloved city. But I don't see any more similarities after that. In Zechariah, the city is taken, and half of the people are taken captive. We don't see that in Revelation chapter 20. As a matter of fact, the indication from Revelation chapter 20 is that there's not even a battle. They just gather together and the Lord brings it to an end and destroys them. And also, immediately following, Satan is cast into the pit and the day of judgment commences. Now in Zechariah, there is considerably more activity after the battle at Jerusalem, including what could even be yet another battle in verses 13 and 14, or it could also be an elaboration of the battle that we've already spoken of in verse 2 and 3. I apologize if I'm confusing anyone. I don't mean to do that. I just want to say that there's been a lot said about Zechariah 14, and I don't believe that it's related to Revelation chapter 20, although there are some similarities. It could be that both texts are speaking of the same period of time at the end of the world, but if they are, the Revelation text is a very abbreviated version without a lot of details, much like the life of Christ is described in Revelation chapter 12, where it just says he's born of the woman and he's caught up to God, leaves out all the details in between. It's possible that Revelation 20 is a similar instance. And if that is the case, then Zechariah chapter 14 is including more details, making it appear to be a longer period of time. And furthermore, Zechariah's prophecy does not cover the coming of the Lord. Several things are certain, though, that the nations will come against Jerusalem, and they will not ultimately prevail, and that the Lord will come against them. Another certain thing is that the people of God will be refined here, and they will be found to be gold in the hand of God. And God will be seen to be righteous in all his doings in saving Israel. As we go through this 14th chapter, we also want to see the Lord's working in our own lives in this. Don't just think of nations alone, but you can see how the Lord has done this with you also. Has there not been some time where he's taken everything away from you but himself and caused you to call out upon his name? Have you not been tried through affliction and distress and been found to be gold? The Lord sees your faith in the trial, and he will remember his mercy. In closing, I want to read from Micah chapter 7. Who is a God like unto thee, that pardoneth iniquity, and passeth by the transgression of the remnant of his heritage? He retaineth not his anger forever, because he delighteth in mercy. He will turn again. He will have compassion on us. He will subdue our iniquities, and thou wilt cast all their sins into the depths of the sea. Thou wilt perform the truth to Jacob, and the mercy to Abraham, which thou hast sworn unto our fathers from the days of old. Amen. Thank you, brother.